Chronometry calibrated. The gateway will open in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Analyzing data. Likelihood of parallel universes now at 5%. Continuing analysis of the many worlds hypothesis.
Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right, even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say, no, this is the many worlds hypothesis. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Gayfish. Joining me, as always, are the lovely Moss.
Hello.
And DemonMama.
Hello.
And today we're going to be continuing our story of Captain America in the MCU with Marvel's Avengers Captain America Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was really floored to find out that this was a Captain America movie. I mean, it's literally in the title, but I had never really, until I went to I think it was last week that I was like, wait a minute, this is a Captain America movie? I just thought it was Avengers Civil War.
Because there's so many people in it, I think.
It has every Avenger except Thor and Hulk. So,
Yeah.
it is an Avengers movie. People were calling it Avengers 2.5.
They even added Ant-Man.
Yeah. And he's not even in Avengers yet.
Yeah. Well, he is now, I guess, honorarily.
Well, I mean, the Avengers just kind of broke up. His single involvement in being an Avenger to this point was fighting half the other Avengers. So I don't know that you can necessarily call him an Avenger.
I do. I call Ant-Man an Avenger.
I mean, I will say, by the time of Endgame, yeah, absolutely, he's an Avenger. It's just, I don't think that being a superhero in an Avengers film is enough to qualify you as being an Avenger. You know,
Well, I have a very liberal interpretation of the Avengers, especially given the actions of given the actions of Tony Stark in this movie. I don't think I want to follow any Avengers exclusionary rules on this one.
No gatekeeping.
We see what he considers an Avenger. I think that's my favorite part about this movie. Legit, I'm so happy that this movie is a movie where there's a serious grappling with Tony Stark and his personality and his decisions, and it's central to the movie and not just kind of oh, well, that's just Tony Stark being Tony, and it's okay because there's scary things out there. And this one, it's oh man, this guy's an asshole.
Well, and so I have always been on Cap's side in this movie. But going through it here, I was also Cap is also kind of a fucking asshole too. It's nobody's really, and I think that was intentional to make sure that, you show the negative aspects of pretty much everyone involved here. But for Tony, he's all talking about, he's dealing with more guilt from Ultron and everything. And then he's confronted by somebody who lost a family member in Sokovia, and his solution is to force everybody else to follow the Sokovia Accords when as soon as the opportunity avails itself to him, he violates it. Right? By the end, he's just yeah, I'm not following that shit either. And it's oh, you fucking asshole, you tore the team apart for accountability that you weren't even willing to accept yourself.
Well, that's the whole thing. I think it's a recurring theme in this movie, or the rules are made up and the points don't matter kind of thing. It's literally there's a point where he's if you guys agree to stop right now, we'll make it legal. It's when I think he's chasing down the Bunky Barnes, when Bunky Barnes and Captain America are running away from his shitty apartment or whatever, and then they get stopped, and it's this is your chance. You stop now, and we can make this an official operation. It's what do you fucking mean we make this an official operation? You're literally just, this is literally just, I mean, they're playing free ball with government approval of actions. It just shows that the Sokovia Accords don't mean anything at all. They're just an expression of power, which I think is really central to this movie and something that made me really like this movie. Mm-hmm. And I should say before I go too far in, this was my favorite one we've watched so far.
I figured you would like it
pretty solidly, which I did not expect. I, for some reason, had it in my mind that the movie has good reviews, but I feel I've only ever heard people speak negatively of this movie. And so I was okay, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that's been my experience with it. But I watched it and I was like, actually, this is the best one so far, especially for Captain America. This
Yeah.
is like Captain America's like, damn, this is where he comes online, which is kind
Mhm.
of wild, but still. But yeah, I really liked the recurring theme of like the arbitrarity of like these super collective government actions, and I feel like it's very hard. The one thing I guess I would say that is, and maybe this is just a limitation of the comic book movie format, but it's just like I feel like it's really hard to actually, if you think about it, really hard. It's hard to come down to on Tony's side in this movie because
Yeah.
it just doesn't make any sense in the context with the other movies to be like, okay, so your problem is that in Winter Soldier, you had Hydra ended up running the main government oversight agency of the superheroes. So you had this centralized power that oversaw and organized superheroes, and they tried to take over the world. And then in Ultron, you said, we need a super centralized AI that's invented by me that can take over and protect the planet. We want it to basically nothing bad to ever happen again. And then in this movie, he's like, oh, I'm learning from my mistakes, guys. We need a centralized superpower that can control everything and make sure that nothing bad ever happens again.
At least he's
And it's
consistent.
When you talk about the arbitrariness, there's an interaction between War Machine and Falcon when they're like all in the Avengers compound arguing over the Accords. He's just like 117 countries want to sign this thing, Sam, and you're just like, nah, it's okay. It's like, this isn't the World Security Council, this isn't Shields, this is the UN, and I'm just like, those are all the same thing.
they're all the same thing. Like we've established that in this universe, large global organizations are incredibly vulnerable to infiltration and control by horrible. I mean, they literally, like, for 3 movies, there was like a dark council of the world that was in presumably like a UN without saying the UN of like evil people who are run by the military industrial complex that just show up and go, our countries don't want that. It's like, I don't know. It's just very hard to be like, okay, yeah, Tony's got a point here. And it like, but they really drive it home throughout the movie. Like, I feel like one of my favorite parts of the movie is like the reveal of the superhero Supermax prison in the middle of the ocean, the like superhero torture center.
The raft,
I love, oh my God, I love that they put like half of your beloved heroes in there. This movie is like, it is like an emotional strong arm, but like, I'm like, it's something to grab onto. And I like that part of this movie so much. Oh God, there's so much I want to talk about with that, but
so like,
yeah.
I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers here in the comment section, but like all of the marketing for this movie was like, are you Team Iron Man or Team Cap? I'm Team Zemo. Because
Yeah.
the ultimate problem here is like, they're all talking about, oh, what does it mean to have unaccountable power? Well, we have to have that power in check by this other unaccountable power. And I'm just like, the power is the problem. Now, Zemo is not like a good person. This is critical support, right? Zemo was like, a special ops guy. He does horrible things in this movie to accomplish his goals, but his goals are to stop superheroes from existing because nobody should have that power.
Yeah.
And like,
I did like the turn that he just like took out the like Soldier Boys. That's what it made me think of. It made me think of Soldier Boys, the guys like sitting in the like
Soldier Boy is based
literal.
on Captain America, so
Yeah, it's like the captain, the like evil, super evil Captain America super soldiers that are all like, oh yeah, they were a death squad before they didn't even need to be brainwashed. They were like ready to kill everybody. We've been keeping them in. And he's just like, nah, I took care of them. Don't worry, guys. I was like,
Well,
wow, dude, based.
and that was those guys are kind of a red herring, but also this I think was like one of the last films, or it might have been like the first film where Marvel Studios got reorganized out from under Marvel Entertainment,
Okay.
because Kevin Feige was fighting with Ike Perlmutter, who was the former owner of Marvel before Disney bought it, and he was still like the president of Marvel Entertainment, and he's like a notorious penny pincher. He didn't want them to have all of the Avengers in this movie, and he wanted like the final fight to just be like Cap and Bucky versus those evil super soldiers in the Arctic that
That would have been
have
terrible.
we've never seen before. Yeah, that would have been a horrible ending. But it would have cost less, even though this movie, what did this movie make at the box office? Yeah, this made over $1 billion. So anyway,
Wow.
yeah, no, and it kind of it was a good move. It was nice to have all of these characters be able to show up, because like I remember after the Avengers, like phase 2 movies where everyone's off in their like own solo adventures, like Iron Man is like, why doesn't Iron Man call the Avengers in when somebody's trying to assassinate the president? Or like where are all of the other Avengers in Winter Soldier? Why doesn't Cap call Tony?
Yeah.
So for like, okay, yeah, no, the Avengers are together at the end of Age of Ultron, so they're still together in Civil War. Let's have them all show up. I think it works great.
There is one thing about that, I guess, that I'll say, which is like, looking back on this Age of Ultron and Winter Soldier, they should have been one big movie, and it would have been so much more satisfying. The plot line of having Shield making like a global network of instant kill button machine thing, like that is also guided by Ultron AI, like those fit together, like they're like a perfect pairing. And then you have that play together into the Civil War. Like the plot line of Winter Soldier, it's like, I don't know, it feels, all these movies felt like a little, and even in Civil War, like the plot line with the super soldiers or whatever, like it was a nice, I don't hate the like side moment with Zemu or whatever, like taking out the guys, that was kind of great. But honestly, like if this had been folded into the collapse of Shield, and it would have been more graceful to have this story be like, look, this organization, Shield, that we're really attached to, that oversees the Avengers, blah, 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 they were taken over the whole time. Cap had a point. Cap stuck to his things. They have the Civil War as a part of that plot line. I just feel like it would have been so graceful to have those movies together. They're all talking about the same subject, but they have like all these other threads in them because of the cinematic universe, like obligatory stuff. And I'm just like sitting here, I was watching it, I'm like, why? We're moving back through some of the steps from the last two movies, but like this time for real. And I was like, that's great. I'm happy that it's this time for real, but like together, I feel like they would have been powerful. It would have been like, damn, this is actually like a graceful telling of this story. But yeah, I don't know. We got, but I just was thinking that while I was watching the movie, like this would have been, this movie and Winter Soldier, they feel like they're really close in their like storyline. But then in this movie, like Shield is missing because they already had to take care of it already. So it's like, I don't know. It just seems like having that system from Shield, I can't remember what it was called, the like Overwatch thing, whatever.
Oversight or Insight.
Insight. Yeah. Like yeah. Project Insight, that like would have fit right in this movie as like, this is what the like UN is trying to do with Shield. This is going to be great, guys. Like you guys don't have to be in charge of everything anymore. And yeah, but still, even still, like I like that they at least handled they at least grappled with the themes in there, and I'm sure we'll get more into it as we go on. But
yeah, it's like Cap's storyline kind of follows this. I mean, it kind of feels to me like basically his whole arc is like, trusting the government to some extent, like willing to be a soldier, like, I see right and wrong, etc. And then like starting to internalize that sense of right and wrong, and like starting to like see how other entities are not operating with the same kind of like moral compass. And I feel like in this movie, especially Cap, I mean, he basically thinks like, yeah, power is a good thing as long as I'm wielding it. Like he is kind of falling into that trap of the like benevolent dictator kind sort of, where it's like, yeah, he doesn't see that like their power is a problem in and of itself. That is kind of raised in this movie where they're like, Vision points out that the events of world-ending potential are happening more often now. And it's like, well, is this our fault? But then Steve just kind of seems to believe that like, yeah, as long as I'm the one doing things, like I trust my judgment and I'm always going to do the right thing, which maybe he would always do the right thing. But it's like the nature of that, you could be the one making the bad decision and still thinking that you're right. And I think the movie does kind of try to make it seem like Cap is in the wrong. and it sort of ends with his alienation. So I guess to some extent the message of the movie is that he was kind of wrong. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I don't feel like the movie thinks that Captain America is wrong. I mean, maybe I think they kind of a little bit sidestep like what you were talking about, like the benevolent dictator aspect of it. They don't really address that head on, partially because I feel like it's taken for granted that superheroes exist in this universe, and like the only answer to like, I mean, they kind of talk about it in that there's like the Zemo thing where it's like, okay, well, I could kill you, but from Cap's angle, that's like, okay, so your answer is to kill everyone who's like me in any way, including like these literal children. Like, that's not acceptable, you know? And so I don't know. Like, I don't know that it really comes away with the conclusion, or at least I didn't really pick up the movie denouncing Cap's position, especially because like the movie ends with him doing a prison break on a supermax prison where a bunch of innocent people that didn't do anything wrong are like held.
They probably caused about $1 billion worth of damage to a German airport.
Well, okay, that's true, but also, whose fault was that? Because if Captain America had just been able to fly to where he wanted to, which he wasn't doing anything wrong, he was just flying in his own freaking jet.
And his fugitive best friend.
Well, his fugitive best friend who didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything.
A bunch of people. I mean,
he didn't kill anybody. He didn't kill anybody. Like, okay, yes, when he was
didn't kill anybody
control.
there. Like Bucky would still be a wanted man for all of the many, many international crimes that he has done. Now, obviously, extenuating circumstances, he was brainwashed, but he still did those things. There is still a concern about him, especially when after they capture him, it's all still in there, and Zemo's able to use that, and he just gets reactivated. By the way, speaking of the activation phrases, so they're all said in Russian, but you can obviously tell that the keywords were written first in English and then just translated to Russian, because one of the words homecoming, which I'm almost positive they threw in just as like because Spider-Man Homecoming was coming.
Yeah.
There's no word for homecoming in Russian. So they had, it translates to a whole ass sentence, Возвращение на родину, which means returning to the homeland. So that one felt a little clunky. It was like homecoming, and it's like this whole ass sentence.
I guess it would be more accurate to say, like, I guess that like at the very end, Captain America has to kind of go underground, which I guess just like as a moment out of context could make it seem like ultimately he was not in the right. But what I mean is, like, I guess the audience is expected to just believe that Cap is always right. So even if he does something that is explicitly illegal, explicitly against the wishes of his friends, and like his friends all have pretty good reasons. Like, I don't feel that there is a really strong like good guy, bad guy thing going on within the Avengers itself. Even the guy, the Secretary of State guy, he's like super reasonable, super chill. And like,
he doesn't look like a Red Hulk at all.
He doesn't. Yeah. So there's this like, I guess because he's worthy, you know, he picked up Mjolnir in the last one that we were talking about. I guess that kind of gives us the impression that like Cap is right no matter what, which like I agree with the things that he is doing in this particular instance, like anarchist Cap for the win. It is very funny to just continuously, like, you know, Tony appealing to authority and Cap just kind of continuing on this journey of like, I don't care what the authorities say. If I don't think it's right, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm like, okay.
I want to see Cap's costume, the A on his head, replaced with an anarchy symbol. So it's still an A, but it's the anarchy symbol. That would be cute. A buddy of mine does have Captain America shield tattoo with the anarchy A. So that's
already
cool.
fire.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it is very fitting in this movie for Captain America's arc. And I don't know, I feel like I think I disagree with you slightly, Moss, in that I do think that this movie is pretty firmly denouncing, or at least it has a statement to say on Tony Stark, down to like the central. When I was watching it, there was one thing where me and my partner were kind of laughing a little bit about like they list like the events that the Avengers did wrong, and it was like two events that like were not reasonable to be considered the fault of the Avengers, and one that is 100% on Tony Stark. So this movie,
and you know what
to
they
me,
don't bring up? They don't bring up Johannesburg, which is
they don't bring up the Hulk.
Yeah, that
the
was
Hulk
the whole
literally trashing a town. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. So, like, on one hand, like, I think some of that is just a little bit of like, I don't know, like, just maybe they didn't quite think that through 100%. But also, like, if you look in the context of the movie, it's people being blamed for things that weren't within their control and being asked by a authority that is desperate to maintain control in one way or another to pay for crimes that they don't really have control over. This is especially true with like Bucky. Like, Bucky is a character who he did not have control of himself because he was controlled by another ascendant government. Either Russia via, post Hydra or Hydra operating through the United States of America. This is a guy who was commanded and controlled by a government agency to the point of erasing his personality. And they're trying to make him pay for that so that they don't have to reckon with their own problems. And This is the exact same thing that Stark is doing throughout the movie. The whole movie is me and Banner chose to make Ultron. That entire movie was on Tony Stark's fault, of him saying, yeah, I'm going to blast forward. No one else approves of me creating an AI an AI like that's going to make sure nothing bad ever happens again by force if necessary. And like then and they're being asked to pay for his crimes. And then there's the other side of it, which is just that, like, there's a line I think that Captain America says where he's like, I don't remember what exactly he says, but he says, but I believe in individuals that, that I know, that I can, understand and talk to and whatever. And that's kind of a recurring theme of like, it's like that line about AI where it's like, you can't let an AI make leadership decisions because a leader needs to be accountable. Mm-hmm. Well, the UN, quote unquote, can't be accountable because the UN doesn't exist. It's a never ending shifting construct full of 100 different people who will all just shift in and out at will. It's a unaccountable machine that wants to control other people. And this is the same
anybody
thing
that it could like that should in theory be held accountable by the UN were the ones who created it and carved out exceptions for themselves so they can never be held accountable.
Exactly.
The veto nations.
The veto nations, and also like you see this there's like 3 layers of that going on in this movie. We see, of course, that the overarching meta-analysis that there are nations within the UN that give themselves the ability to violate the UN at will. There is also, Tony does the exact same thing, will make it legal, quote unquote. And then the real one that's really interesting is the introduction of Black Panther, who he doesn't face any repercussions throughout the movie because he's a king. He's a literal monarch. And he can just go, yeah, who cares? I want this thing because I want to use it to strong arm you. And to be fair, he has like
I ask you now, as both warrior and king, how long do you think you can keep your friends safe from me?
Yes. And it's literally like, I mean, at the end, he has like a moment where he kind of looks in the mirror. And I was like, I literally said at the end of the movie when he does the little scene with Zemo or whatever, where he's like, I was like, finally, someone looked in a mirror. And it was like legit. It's just like, but he has this whole thing throughout the movie of being completely immune to the repercussions of his action because he's a king of a sovereign nation, despite the fact that he's participating in this structure that gives accountability to everyone except for himself. It's kind of wild, like how heavy that aspect of the movie is. This idea that like it's not a good thing for a government agency or a government power or anything to be able to completely and utterly eclipse an individual. And Bucky Barnes is like really key to this movie's, to like the parallels being drawn in this movie between like the Accords and what is done to somebody. Captain America is afraid, and rightfully so, of him and his friends being made into people like Bucky Barnes. The recurring line of him saying, they say a couple times in the movie, like they talk about like being made to do something that they don't want to do, and also being forbidden from doing something that is right because of something else. It's like if you have, I think it's like, I'm trying to remember who says the line, but it's like if you have the power to do something and you don't do it, like
that's Peter. That's Peter.
That was Peter.
Yeah, Spider-Man.
He said it because he couldn't. They didn't want to just reuse the "with great power comes great responsibility," so they had to find another way to say it.
Oh my god,
that's like the plagiarism dodging AI.
But straight up, it was like that portion of it is like Bucky. But I can't believe it. I was like, I love that this movie like gave Bucky so much and gave him so much. There was so much in this movie that I was like, what the hell? I was so happy when Hawkeye showed up. I was like, yeah! And I couldn't
He's
believe
grown
that
on me,
after
for sure.
I know.
You know, I gotta say, like, I kind of love Hawkeye's relationship with Wanda, but it really doesn't, like, we'll see a little bit more of it, like, in Endgame. But here, it like, this is like kind of the last time that we really see them interact. And it's like, okay, Wanda had her show. Hawkeye had his show. They obviously have a connection. He's the most human of the Avengers. He's the one who connected with her and got her to become an Avenger. And like, he's giving her pep talks and everything like that. And this is it. They'll commiserate it in a couple movies, but like, I don't know. I want to see more of them.
It's interesting how there's like not very much to their relationship after this point. And then the opposite side of it, where it's like there's been these little tiny things that indicate that Vision and Wanda are going to be like a thing later. And then I just feel like there's a lot less supporting them having an entire show together versus like their relationship pre-existing with Wanda and Clint.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like, I think it's really telling in this movie that like all of the characters that have had an experience of like people taking their autonomy away, like align with Cap, down to, of course, even Black Widow, which I was like sitting there waiting for that.
She was
I'm like
playing sides, but of course she was going to go with Cap.
Well, that's her nature. I thought that was great that it was like, okay, she continues to be like a spy. She's like, oh yeah, you know, honestly, I'm on this side because I got to think about how she's always a little duplicitous. You know what I mean? That's like her whole thing. And she has a tendency of like, I think they even make a joke like, oh, you're always switching sides. And it's like, well, yeah, but you knew she was going to do that. Her background is that she was like forced and initiated by like a horrible assassin agency into being like doing horrible things for half her life. Of course, she's not going to want the UN, who probably oversaw that project or something, to do it again.
Her support of the Sokovia Accords was entirely an act of pragmatism, right?
Yes.
It is like, if we don't do this now, it will be done to us later. With one hand on the wheel, we can still steer. But it's obvious she's not happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, she has real reason to she has more reason to fear repercussions from the UN than almost any other character, because like she's
a war criminal, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, no, I meant like that too, but also like that she could be shot and die. Like she doesn't have like super strength, right? Like she's just like
she's just super reflexes for her personally. Yeah.
She's a well-trained assassin who's got some gadgets. That's about it.
I was gonna say earlier, I was just gonna respond to something DemonMama said earlier, which I do think it's kind of funny that like, yeah, Tony is the one who has done many of the wrong things throughout this whole series, and he recognizes that he requires oversight, that he needs someone keeping him in check because he does not have control over himself. And then he decides like, oh, I'm going to impose that on everybody else, including Steve, who we have seen frequently make the correct decision, be on the correct side of things. And for Tony, it's almost like Tony is trying to like exercise power over everyone else. And like this projection that because he needs someone to approve of his actions before he actually does them, that therefore everybody else also needs this kind of oversight and approval too.
Well, and he never actually takes, like, he never actually accepts that oversight. He's always finding ways around it. And it's like, well, of course, because he's a billionaire, he doesn't have the same accountability that other people do. He's golfing buddies with the Secretary of State, right? Like, sure, Ross can be stern and annoyed with him, but it's obvious that when he's stern and annoyed to somebody who he doesn't have any real power over. So, Tony was never in the same boat as the rest of them.
No, and it's like whenever there needs to be an accountability taken, he defers it on to everybody. We all got to do this, while there's always a carve out for him. There is literally down to the point of him having like secret Iron Man suits hidden all over the place. One in his ship, one in his little locket or whatever he has that he activates, where he's got like, I've got an Iron Man glove here. He literally can't. Like, so he wants other people. Like, he said, come on, guys, we're in this together when it's time to take the repercussions for his actions. But it always leaves him in a position of still having an out, of still having power over other people. And also, I think it's telling that like he completely can't escape his own like perspective. There's a scene towards the end of the movie when he's having a big all-out fight with Captain America in this like weird like concrete tunnel or something, like at the very tail end of the movie, and
Pretty cool.
He thinks that he thinks that Captain America is going to cut his head off. Like, and he acts like this guy, like Captain America, he still doesn't understand his own friend. And like, he gives a speech about like, oh, we were friends. I thought we were friends or whatever. And then when Captain America gets the upper hand and is like holding his shield up to take out the little arc thing on the suit so he can't use the suit anymore to beat up his friends. And he thinks he's like, he acts like Captain America's going to chop his head off because that's what he's thinking. Like, it tells you that's what he's thinking about, especially given that
Cap would kill Tony to save Bucky's life, but it didn't come to that point. He knew he could just disable him. If it came to it, if he had to choose, he would absolutely kill Tony to save Bucky. And like the line, "He's my friend, so was I." Like, were they ever really friends? They have had an antagonistic relationship the entire MCU.
Does Peggy even tell him about Peggy? Like, does he even tell him that she was alive in the first place? He does not go to any of them when he's initially dealing with the grief of her passing. He goes alone, and then the wingsuit guy, I can't remember his name, right? Falcon is the one who's actually there at the funeral, and then Scarlett Johansson shows up and she's like, hey, I'm going to hug you because we're friends. I don't actually think that Tony is friends with him. No, I don't think that they have that kind of trust at all.
Well, and Cap didn't tell Tony that, Hydra had killed his parents. Like, he learned that in Winter Soldier. Like, it's when they see Zola and Zola flashes all of those like news articles taking credit for them. One of them is Howard Stark's death. So like, Cap knew then and chose never. And like he addresses, he's like, maybe I thought by not telling you, I was sparing you the grief. But it's like, but really the thing is that if they had been closer, if they had been actually friends, he wouldn't have had that thought. He would have been like, dude, I gotta tell. If he had known like how
definitely
wrapped up in grief. Because like a big like Tony's grief over his parents is like one of the big recurring themes in here. He keeps going back to it, and Cap would have known that if they were friends. So they weren't never friends. They were colleagues.
Yeah. They're soldiers on the same platoon or whatever.
And they don't. There's very clearly not like a trust between them, and. I think part of it too is that like I think Cap, for good reason, believed that like if I give this information to Tony, like he will hurt someone with it. He'll hurt someone who didn't have control, like because it's like, oh, I need to punish somebody. Like that's his like that's kind of his modus at this point. Like I don't know. Also,
honestly,
there's another thing.
That's right there when Cap saw that the Hydra killed Howard Stark. That he should have got Tony on the phone like that second going, hey, listen, Shield's compromised and they killed your dad. So I'm going to need you to come in. And he would show up and help them fight the helicarriers. He would probably be like, oh, they're using my repulsor technology. Well, good thing I've got my Stark proprietary software on there. Pew, they're all shut down.
Yeah. It again, another reason why I think it would have been more graceful for this whole series to have these movies all be one storyline, because then you would have Stark with a reason to not intervene there, as opposed to just conspicuously being missing from the script. But there's another thing that was in this scene that was really interesting, and I think indicts Stark's character, which is when they're fighting at the hangar. Which, oh my god, I have another thing I got to say about that. But when they're fighting at the hangar, there's like an incident where Vision accidentally blasts War Machine out of the sky. Yeah, he knocks him out of the sky, and then he gets paralyzed. And Tony Stark's like super mad about it. He's like, how did this happen? And like he's like, I'm gonna go beat the hell out of Captain America for this. And it's like not like 3 scenes later. So like an accident no one meant for War Machine to be hit there. It is Vision's fault, technically. He did it. He obviously didn't mean to. Someone moved. He didn't have perfect concentration because he was emotionally compromised, which is a human thing to have happen. And they're fighting with weapons in a fairly public area. But like Captain America's like, we'll look aside and blame Stark is like, we'll look aside and blame Captain America for this. Then when they're fighting, he just out of his own anger and frustration, completely of his own volition, not an accident, rips off Bucky's arm. He's just like, I'm going to tear your friend's arm off. Like,
blast
it's
it
just
off.
like,
Actually, okay.
Yeah. I think he tears it off, doesn't he?
He blasts it off because actually Bucky is trying to pull out his arc reactor. Like Bucky has his hand on the arc reactor and he blasts the arc reactor to stop it. It wasn't just out of like, oh, I'm just going to do this. It was partially in self-defense.
No, I just mean that like it's his volition. It's not like Vision is an accident and like, oh, I'm going to blame this on, Captain America. Like Tony Stark doesn't have a full understanding of like, he doesn't have a relationship to responsibility that makes any sense. It is a purely egotistical relationship to responsibility, which is that I should never face repercussions for my actions at any point, but everyone else always needs to. Someone always needs to pay when I am made to feel bad. When my friend falls and hurts his back, like that's somebody's fault. When I rip off somebody's arm, well, there's always an excuse. But it's like, I don't know, his inability to like even grapple with until he's forced to grapple with the fact that like Bucky was being mind controlled by evil Nazis. Like he didn't do murders. His body did them at the puppeteering of an evil organization. Like,
well, and I think that
Tony Stark can't see that.
If Tony had been given that information, earlier, then he wouldn't have had that reaction. But it was just the visceral. He didn't even know his parents had been murdered. He thought it was just a car accident. And he watches a video of his parents getting brutally murdered. And I love that touch that even though Bucky has this metal arm, it's his human arm that he chokes the life out of Tony's mom. Yeah. So you watch that video. You tell me you're going to have a rational, immediate reaction to it? No, like I totally understand Tony trying to kill Bucky there. If that had been me, I probably would have had the same reaction. That's why Cap should have fucking told him so that he could have dealt with that in a safe space where he's not immediately going to murder the guy who did it, who's literally in the room with him.
Tony is super childish. Like, I think that, some of the things that we've been talking about kind of coalesce into just acknowledging that this is a fundamental part of him. He is emotionally stunted. His parents died when he was younger. He feels a lot of remorse and regret. He feels overshadowed because his father clearly admired Steve in a way that, like, he did not give that attention to Tony. He was, even when he complimented Tony in the memory, it's a sarcastic compliment. And I think that, like, it reflects on a lot of his behavior, that he is just very immature, very childish, does not have the emotional regulation skills that you need to be an adult. And to be an adult with this much power and this much money, and I'm sure that the money kind of keeps him emotionally stunted as well. But I kind of think that maybe that might be also something that bled into Ultron, that Ultron was in a way kind of Tony's personality infused into him. And that's why we see so many childish behaviors from him as well, that he's like, don't compare me to my dad. Like Tony Stark used to say that. Nuh-uh, it's my phrase now. Like it just screams deeply immature, deep daddy issues that have not been resolved and that like are still deeply impactful on his life and therefore everybody that he interacts with.
Everyone on the planet in this particular case.
Literally.
Yeah. Also, this is a perfect opportunity, since we're talking about children, to talk about the Tony Stark having a child soldier problem.
Yeah.
That was the most stunning part of this movie. I forgot that, like, I guess, I don't know.
Peter's either a freshman or a sophomore.
He's like,
I think a sophomore,
really young, and like Tony's just like, yeah, I'm gonna show up at this random kid who's enamored with me's house, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, dude, you could be cool too if you become a fucking soldier. I was joking about like, boss, what are you doing? I was just thinking Metal Gear Solid 5 the whole time of like. boss, you can't have child soldiers. That's insane. Like, just like there's a storyline in Metal Gear Solid 5 where like there's this evil child who's like really good at fighting and keeps beating up other children, and boss is like, I should train him to be a soldier. And then Kaz is like, I'll kill you. What are you thinking? A child soldier? Are you nuts? And it's just like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. I'm like, who's gonna tell him? Like, you can't have a child soldier. This is fucked up. And in fact, if you know what? Think about it, he has two. He has two child soldiers, and he has a child in prison in his compound. It's insane. Tony's lost his mind.
Who's the other child soldier?
Vision.
Vision. Vision's 1 year old.
He's brand new. He's a baby.
He's a robot. It's different.
I know it's a technicality, but still, he's only 1 year old.
No,
and
absolutely.
The first time they put him in a battle,
what the fuck are you
like,
doing with Spider-Man?
Yeah,
I was just like, wow, that is so. It's so messed up. I was sitting there laughing. I was like, wait a minute, I forgot that Spider-Man is canonically a kid in this timeline, because the only one I've seen with the Tom Holland Spider-Man is what? Oh my God, what's the one?
Was it the one with all the other Spider-Mans?
Move Along Home?
No, there's Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. No Way Home is the one with the other Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's technically an adult in the third one.
Yeah, he's like an adult in that
one.
So I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then I saw him like, oh my God, he's supposed to be like a baby. He's like a tiny baby.
And he was like, a baby. He was 19 in this movie. Like the actor.
Yeah, come help me blow up a airport and beat up my friends who won't listen to me. It's so pathetic.
Well, and I don't know that, like, there have been a lot of criticisms about Spider-Man in the MCU, how there's a lot of elements of him that really don't mesh with who he usually is, because a big part of Parker's storyline is that he's always having to struggle with stuff. He's struggling to, pay the bills and, get homework done and hide his secret identity from everyone and worry about his old aunts. Although here, Marissa Tomei is definitely not an old aunt, but here he has a billionaire benefactor who, makes sure that he gets this, and like in Homecoming, we find out that suit, it's not just like, it's not just a spandex suit. It's like basically got, its own AI in there. It's got all sorts of like fancy gadgets. Tony like really kitted it out. So you're, handing a 15-year-old a multi-million-dollar weapon. It literally has an instant kill mode.
That's, I think, a later version of it.
No, that's literally the same suit. I mean, he doesn't use the instant kill mode until but like in Spider-Man Homecoming, there is an instant kill mode in the suit. Now,
I remember that. I just thought that it was a different suit, so I'm just not remembering.
He doesn't use it. Like the AI tries to activate. He's like, "What? No, I'm not using instant kill." He pulls it out, I think, in Endgame. When it's monsters and it doesn't matter.
That is so just. This is all just making Stark's behavior towards Spider-Man so incredibly even more fucked up.
When Peter is on his own, when he's like he was always originally in the comics, a high schooler. When he, got the powers, but he was on his own and he kept his identity from everyone. He actually like tried to join the Fantastic Four early on and they rejected him, but they had no idea he was a kid. But Tony knows he's 15. Or he doesn't know the exact age. He does like War Machine goes, geez, Tony, how young is this guy? He's like, I don't know. I didn't carbon date him. He's on the young side. So maybe Tony knows he's a kid, but didn't like. It's like, if I don't look up his age, I have plausible deniability.
Yeah, he's old enough. He's old enough to be a child soldier and get in a fist fight with a guy who fought in World War II.
Yeah, it's objectifying. Like that relationship is so uncomfortable. The more you think about it, like the power dynamic and like. The fact that like, okay, we don't even get a I was bit by a spider moment because they play for a joke that Tony interrupts him and doesn't even let him explain like how I got my powers. Like Peter is an object.
It's just Tony. Yeah, it's literally just Tony going, here's a kid. I need someone with superpowers to help me beat up the people with superpowers I want to control. Here's this kid that's impressionable. I can use my celebrity status to like get him to be my soldier.
The way that Spider-Man is worked into the story, like it is one of those things where like they are a slave to the film rights, where Peter's story has to be something that could be easily cut from the film. In fact, early trailers didn't even trailers that showed, the Avengers lining up and fighting each other. They didn't even have Spider-Man in those shots because they added him in post because they were still hammering out the final details of the deal with Sony to share Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And if that fell through, well, then they could just cut all of his stuff and it wouldn't affect the rest of the story. So because of that, because he's not well integrated into the story, and because it was something that's look, this is just an extra to set up Spider-Man Homecoming, we can't spend much time with it, so we kind of got to yada yada real quick and get it through because this isn't Spider-Man's movie.
It just reflects very poorly on Tony. Obviously, there are a lot of things that go into this from the movie making aspect of it. It's just if we're taking it for granted that this is just how the story is, it don't look good. It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it continues Tony's character of in this moment basically doing almost anything that he can do in order to maintain power over the Avengers, while feigning an interest in some kind of oversight or limitation. But in truth, he's just acting out his fears in a way that puts him in a position of power. I'm scared that the world's going to go bad, that bad things are going to happen to me and the people that I care about, and so I need to control everybody in order to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't give a shit about international law when I just think it's not a big deal to break it, like bringing a teenager without a passport across sovereign lines.
Yeah.
So, to talk about the other new superhero that was introduced in this one, Black Panther, there was a note that I had in this, and part of it is just that obviously they hadn't had everything developed for the film Black Panther yet. But I'm noticing the fashion, ignoring the suit itself, just the regular clothes that all the Wakandans we see in this movie wear. It's very Western wear. When you don't know yet, and it's okay, we're going to the UN, everyone's going to be wearing Western suits. That's kind of expected, except that Wakanda has resisted colonization. It has never been colonized. It is, this Pan-African ideal. And so it's weird to just see, the king of Wakanda in a three-piece suit. It's weird to see Chadwick Boseman wearing kind of, in some scenes, more casual Western garb. And when we see Wakandans in diplomatic settings in future installments, they are not wearing Western garb. They're very much wearing, the Pan-African inspired designs. Yeah. And I just thought it's interesting that they just didn't give it a lot of thought yet. They're well, we'll introduce Black Panther, and it's well, it's the UN, of course they're going to be wearing suits. Just, who thinks about these things and who doesn't? Now, and even then, later in the movie, I think the post-credit scene where they're in Wakanda, T'Challa is wearing something that's a little bit more colorful and has, African print style on it. So they're kind of moving from Western garb to the more, African influenced fashion. But I was just noticing, I'm it's interesting to see how things develop from early on into when we get into Black Panther, how the fashion is just, hey, fuck Western influence. This is what this continent comes up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that's a good point. I do think that Black Panther's character and introduction in this movie kind of suffers from the cinematic universe problem. Yeah. Which is again also a problem for Spider-Man as well, as we just discussed, where it's do you really think it's the best point to introduce your hero Black Panther is having him be a vengeful pseudo villain who's kind of just takes the side of the movies. I wouldn't say that Tony Stark is the villain of this movie, but he's certainly this movie is very critical. He is an antagonist, and for very good reason. And it's just that they introduced their new hero Black Panther as taking the side of this guy for super selfish reasons. It's kind of, I mean, I'm glad that they give him a moment in the end where he kind of is the first one to realize what's going on and put two and two together and go, okay, actually, we really shouldn't torment this Bunky Barnes. We shouldn't torment him anymore. We should give him a little pod to sleep in, because that would be nice to do. So like I'm glad that they do that, but it's just like it feels, again, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, they had to get Black Panther into this movie because the Black Panther movie is going to be coming out. So they just kind of put him in there without thinking about how it reflects on his character and what it sets him up for, like within the universe. Same thing, obviously, with Spider-Man, where you're just like, what are we really doing here? And it's something I always kind of don't like about these movies, is that there's so much stuff like that where it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I feel like at least Black Panther had a character arc in this movie versus
He did, yeah.
Peter. Yeah, so like, he starts out, he's like, I agree with the Sokovia Accords. Like, I'm here because I agree with that. I think that we need this oversight. My dad got killed. Now I'm super pissed off. And then at the end, he's like, yeah, revenge is not the way to go. I'm not going to let, this negative feeling consume me. And so like, yeah, we get at least those beats. I understand that, like, feeling like it's forced. And yes, it's like every single one of these movies is like, how much shit can we throw at the wall? But then with Peter, at least, like, by comparison, they introduce both of these superheroes. They both join Iron Man's side, and Peter doesn't have like anything going on internally, like emotionally.
Yeah.
He just kind of is there.
He's there so that people can go, finally, Spider-Man's in the MCU. That's literally it.
Yep.
That's literally it.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit of a bummer, and I do agree. It is good that, like, at least they gave Black Panther like a proper arc and some stuff to think about, and it just kind of seems like, I don't know, it seems like a bad introduction spot to have this guy who's going to be your hero, who is cool and has a stylish outfit and is a great, is played by this great actor, and it sucks to have him come in and be like, play a weird position of second fiddle to Tony Stark in a way that's like, oh, actually, like, I support this extremely hypocritical measure that I openly flaunt, that I don't actually have to follow, that I'm basically trying to create a situation where my country and my sovereignty as a monarch it like limits my competition. It just reflects poorly on his character. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think that was necessary. It doesn't seem necessary. And it certainly doesn't seem like the type of character that they were trying to make for Black Panther. I don't think he's supposed to be like a king who's like kind of politicking to take out his opposition and I don't know, who's like really quick to anger and goes after a guy that like wasn't even proven to have done the crime, and then even after there's like evidence that he didn't do the crime, he still keeps going after him. I don't know, it's just, I don't know, very weird decision of way to introduce this character that seems like he's supposed to be pretty awesome. I don't know that much about Black Panther because I haven't seen Black Panther the movie. I guess we're going to watch that next. So,
well, that's actually what I was going to bring up, was because this has been Captain America's story that we're going through, but I did, offer that up, that if we wanted to take a detour and watch Black Panther, and like I would like that. You would like to see it. Okay, well then,
I would,
we will be watching Black Panther next before we get into Infinity War and Endgame.
Awesome.
And we're coming up on an hour here, so I guess it's time for everyone's final thoughts. Moss, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I like that this movie has more interesting meat to chew on as far as like the political implications, and it is quite similar to Our World in some ways. I do think it's kind of funny that like the UN and like international law kind of isn't real. Like, I just saw a short that was basically like, the premise was, the girl is coming to ask, and it seems like the dad is about to have to field the "is Santa real?" But then she's like, "Is international law real?" And he's like, "No, honey, I'm sorry, it's not. Give me a hug." And it's like very funny to be witnessing this in real time in our current world, everything with Gaza and the veto power that the United States has, and like people getting away with international crimes, and then that feeling like a very overwhelming actual force in the movie. Like, the idea that the UN has any power to do anything actually is kind of hilarious to me, because that is sort of the big bad in this. I mean, yeah, obviously we have like the very human conflict with Zemo, but as far as the kind of big thing that really tears apart Tony and Cap is this ideological belief in giving over power to like international law, basically. And it's just very funny to me. And obviously, I'm I appreciate the road that Cap is on. This is why I like him, is not just any one portrayal, is like the fact that he goes on this journey, that he becomes a rebel, that he becomes an outlaw, basically. Very cool stuff. Obviously, as with all Marvel movies, there's a lot of criticisms to be made, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting and it explored some of those characters. And that's kind of what keeps this whole thing alive from one movie to the next, is like seeing how they grow to love each other and hate each other and have all those nice moments, those interpersonal interactions.
All right, DemonMama?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. Like, it was my favorite of all of the ones that we've watched so far. I felt like there was a lot to bite into. Most of the movie, and it's not without its, its Marvelisms, I guess, but most of the movie felt like it was doing things with the different characters. It was showing you something about a character and their values. I feel like even Hawkeye and Falcon really got a lot of attention in that way, that it made you feel like you understand where they stand and how they look at things. That Falcon is like, a former soldier who's realized that like the machine that he was once a part of can do a lot of bad, and it's up to him to make sure that the world's a better place. I think that's awesome. I think it's really cool. And I don't know. I really like that aspect of this movie. I do wish, like, outside of this film, I wish that the Marvel Cinematic Universe would have been a little more attentive to these things in previous films. I wish that we could have seen more of this, and what was building up to what we saw with Cap in this movie was awesome. And I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see that be more articulated in the previous films, where it kind of feels a little bit like we thought about this in retrospect and now we made a good movie about it. And I don't know, but it does kind of feel like that. Like, I mean, in a lot of the stuff is like, it didn't feel like it was super present in the previous movies, but now they're sort of retrospectively going, oh yeah, remember when Captain America was in World War II? Well, we didn't really write his thoughts about that in the original movie, but we did it now. And that's fine. It's better. It's good. It makes this movie good. How it fits into the arcs, I don't know. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I thought it was funnier, more interesting, and had more meat on the bone than any of the previous ones. So I'm looking forward to see where it goes from here. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep it up, but we're in completely unknown territory for me. So yeah.
That's what I like to see. Maybe you can, because I know for a long time for this podcast, you've been pretty cynical, but it's also been films that you've already mostly seen. So coming to it with a fresh slate, I don't know, maybe you've got the theater high coming in.
It could be, but I mean, also, I don't know. I felt like there was a lot there just was a lot for me to think about and like talk about in this movie. And it does feel like there's been a continuous increase in like, okay, we're actually like, there's still a lot of spectacle. Obviously, there's superhero movies, but there's like okay, we're starting to figure out who these characters are and what they actually stand for. And then the filmmakers start to have something to actually say about the movie, as opposed to like, oh, well, we got to put all these superheroes in this film to set up the other 8 films, Yeah,
I gotcha.
Where it's like, no, like we have this relationship between Falcon and Captain America is here because the movie, it's doing something in the movie. Their history together has a purpose. It's not just Falcon has a TV series coming out. We got to find a way to fit him in.
Although they didn't do a lot with him either. I feel like I don't know much about who he is as a human person still. But then he gets a whole show.
What Cap does, just slower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's still very much a side character, but there's more. There's something.
And we will get to that later. Thank you all so much for being here. I've been Gayfesh.
I'm Moss.
And I'm DemonMama.
And we will catch you in Wakanda. Bye.
Bye.